the front lines of law, leadership, and public service. From the courtroom to the classroom, Attorney Karen Jimeno brings sharp legal insight, academic excellence, and a voice that has guided national conversations. Attorney Mike Toledo, a seasoned public affairs strategist and legal mind with years in media, corporate leadership, and government reform. Together, they bring law to life with experience, integrity, and the courage to ask hard questions. Two minds shaped by the law. Two voices trusted in and out of the courtroom. This is ABOGADO.
Good evening and welcome to ABOGADO, where legal minds engage in thoughtful exchange on the most pressing issues of our time. I'm Attorney Mike Toledo.
And I'm Attorney Karen Jimeno. Tonight, we examine a cornerstone of our democratic system, one that continues to stir intense legal and political debate: term limits for elected officials.
Supporters argue that term limits prevent the concentration of power and promote leadership renewal. But critics say they restrict voter choice and cut short the service of effective public officials.
Before we hear from our guests, let's take a moment to understand what's at stake. Here's the proposition we're tackling tonight.
In a democracy, the people's voice is supreme. But should there be limits to power? Are term limits protecting us from abuse or holding back great leaders? If we remove the limits, do we give voters true freedom or open the door to unchecked rule? Will democracy thrive with endless choice or crumble without boundaries? Tonight, we confront a defining question for the future of our nation. The big question: should term limits for elected officials be removed?
Supporting the removal of term limits is Attorney Demosthenes Dindo Donato. Attorney Donato is the president and counsel of Tanggulang Demokrasya, or Tandem, a civic group advocating for constitutional reform. A lawyer with over 3 decades of experience, he holds an LLM from Fordham University and degrees in law and economics from Ateneo. He has served on national legal reform bodies and is known for his work in governance and public policy.
Meantime, challenging the proposition is Attorney Socorro Maricel Nepomuceno. Attorney Nepomuceno earned her law degree from the Institute of Law, Far Eastern University, and has been running her own law office for nearly 2 decades. She is best known for leading a 2019 petition before the Supreme Court that sought to compel the Commission on Elections, or the COMELEC, to enforce constitutional term limits on elected officials. With her legal expertise and direct involvement in this very issue, Attorney Nepomuceno brings both principle and experience to tonight's discussion.
Before we begin, let's walk you through how this discussion will unfold. Here's a quick look at the structure that will guide tonight's conversation.
We begin with opening statements. Each side is given 2 minutes to lay down the foundation of their arguments. The affirmative goes first, followed by the negative. The debate then unfolds through 2 key subtopics. For each one, both sides will deliver a 2-minute constructive speech, starting with the affirmative, then the negative. After the speeches, we move into the open exchange, a 6-minute free-flowing discussion where the debaters may ask questions, raise rebuttals, and respond to each other directly. Once both subtopics have been explored, we proceed to the closing statements. Each debater has 2 minutes to summarize their position and leave you, the audience, with a compelling final message. And finally, to bring the conversation full circle, our hosts will pose their own questions in a 6-minute moderated segment. This final round allows for a clarification, deeper insight, and ensures that no critical point is left unanswered.
Well, I'm sure that's quite clear for both lawyers. So let's begin. Tonight's proposition: should term limits for elected officials be removed? We'll start with our guest opening statements. Attorney Donato, you have up to 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mike, Karen, Attorney Nepomuceno. Basically, I have three major points, but a total of five. Number one, as far as we are concerned, and we have been doing this for like 15 years and even beyond that, term limits is not the problem. The real problem is dominance of the rich and famous candidates in elections. That is the real problem. Number two, by focusing ourselves on term limits, it's like we're giving people a false hope that we are addressing the problem when in fact, as far as we are concerned, we are not. Number three, term limits gives us a new problem actually. It aggravates the family dynasty issue. Like previously, there had been no term limits. So it's just the old man running and running and running and running until he retires. Because of the term limits, he now learns to make his wife run, then his son, and then his daughter. It aggravates the problem. Number four, instead of term limits, I think what we should do is focus on accountability provisions. That's more important if you want good governance. In other words, we put in all the mechanisms in the Constitution that will allow us to remove those who are sitting there. Vote of no confidence, recall of even congressmen, dissolution of the assembly, etc. Number five, if we are looking at a new breed, let's say I think that's one of the points there. We cut the term so that there will be new blood coming in. We don't think it will work. Why? Because the problem of rich and famous candidates are still there. Even if you have new blood every elections coming up, they will never win. Or it will be very difficult for them to win. So the solution there, as far as we are concerned, is to shift from voting at large to voting in small districts. In that way, the small candidates, unknown and poor, nothing, no campaign funds, they will have a fair chance of
thank you,
winning
Attorney
against
Dindo.
the entrenchment.
And I love how Attorney Dindo is such a lawyer. He has his own timer. Did you notice he set that up? Bago siya magsalita, talaga sigurista. Okay, so now, Attorney Nepomuceno, you have 2 minutes as well for your opening statement.
I am proposing the retention of term limits as provided for in our 1987 Constitution. The main reason of which and for which is so that we as a nation will be able to preserve our democracy, our cherished democracy that we have been enjoying since 1987. I believe that should the term limits be removed from our Constitution, this will gradually open the doors to a devolution to a certain form of government that is less than democratic, which may not be necessarily beneficial to our country, especially that we are strong in our democratic principles. So removing term limits would be equivalent to throwing our country into darkness, because lifting term limits is equivalent and effectively lifting democracy. So I don't know what kind of government we might devolve into. There is a possibility we might return to a dictatorship or to an authoritarian form of government. This I can explain how is this possible if we remove the term limits. There is empirical evidence supporting the fact that term limits in a constitution or provision for term limits in any constitution actually and effectively preserves democracy. And there is empirical evidence to prove that.
Okay. So, Attorney Nepomuceno, your time's up, but it seems like your empirical evidence is right before you. This
Yes, it's right
paper
before me. It is a paper
of the European Commission
issued by the European Commission for Democracy Through Law. It is a report on democracy, limitation of mandates, and incompatibility of political functions. In Europe, they they call term limits as limitation of mandates.
Okay. And so let's go. I think this is the opportune time to go to our subtopic. Let's begin with our first subtopic, the effects on democratic accountability and political performance. How do term limits impact governance, public accountability, and the rise or fall of political dynasties? Attorney Donato.
You have 2 minutes for that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let me start. Thank you. From what we know, from what we understand, term limits have nothing to do with governance, good governance. It applies to everyone, whether you are a good governor or a bad governor, you have a term limit. So it has nothing to do with good behavior. Secondly, it has nothing to do with accountability. If you are looking for accountability, what we should do is we put in all the mechanisms on how to remove the incumbent mid-term, not wait for the next elections, mid-term and immediate, no need for like vote of no confidence, etc. Again, also, from what we know, it has nothing to do with leadership because precisely you're limited. You cannot you develop that in decades, not years. So we will just go back to the on the effect of this short term. From what we basically what we would like is like a 5 years. Why 5 years? It's usually because of the economic programs, usually multiples of 5. So that's what we were thinking. But as long as during the 5-year period, you have ways to remove whoever is there. That's what we would like to have. Yes, 6 years for us, that's too long. 1 year of plunder, 1 year of injustice, that's too much. We cannot wait for 3 years or 6 years. Okay, and yes, like I said, to breed a new group of leaders, it's not the term limits. It's we have to change the way we select our public elective officials. Small districts, not the big ones, because then the smaller candidates will have a fair chance. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Attorney. And now, Attorney Nepomuceno, you have 2 minutes specifically to discuss the effects of term limits on public accountability, governance, and political dynasties.
Political dynasties?
Yes.
Right. In the Philippines, I would like to give an example, like, say, the mayoralty. Okay, a mayor has a term limit of 3 years, and he may run for 3 consecutive terms. So for a period of 3 years, the limited period of 3 years will pressure the mayor to provide and show high quality of governance, because the incentive to be re-elected for a second term and a third term is there. So the term limit serves as an incentive for the mayor to perform well. For if he, like, especially in the Philippines, plenty of mayors are being re-elected for 3 consecutive terms. And this serves the advantage of their constituents. Because when the electorate re-elects them again and again, that means they are, it is a sign that, or an indication that they are performing well. Public accountability, when a mayor, for example, is given only a limited time of 3 years, he is well aware that after his term expires, he will be held accountable. As opposed to when there is no term limit, the mayor will tend to be complacent and take his public functions for granted. There will be no sense of accountability because his tenure in office is already secured. And as for political dynasties, the existence of term limits may give rise to political dynasties, but only for a limited term as well. So a mayor may serve for 3 consecutive terms. The dynasty lasts also for 3 consecutive terms.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. And partner, we now open the floor for our 6-minute exchange between our two guests. Now, this is your opportunity to engage directly, ask questions, clarify positions, and of course, challenge each other's arguments. Attorney Karen and I will, of course, moderate to ensure a fair, focused, and respectful discussion. And I think at this point, we can also ask questions.
Yes, and I think there's a lot of questions that can be asked on both sides, because I did hear very controversial terms like giving away or letting our democracy fall. So please, we can start the conversation.
Please.
Okay, let me start.
Yeah.
I had occasion to deal with a German lawyer before, and I thought he told me they were our clients. He told me, Dindo, your constitution is very strange. So I was thinking it's because of the economic investment restrictions, because that's not found anywhere. It's only in the Republic of the Philippines. So I thought he was referring to that, but he was not. Well, so why? Why is it strange? Because you have the term limits. In Europe, they don't have that. Maybe because it's parliament. If it's in a parliament where the power is dispersed, majority of a collegial body instead of one person controlling everything, you don't need that. That's probably redundant. So anyway, maybe I'll also relay something that a colleague from Tandem told me. He said that there was this story in, I think it's a fact, in India, the Cobra effect. I don't know if you've heard of that. The problem was there's too many cobras in the communities. It posed a safety concern, right? So India government came up with the solution. Okay, we'll have a budget. We'll pay everybody who can bring me a dead cobra. Okay, so hopefully that will solve the problem, right? Yeah. It did not. Why? Some enterprising Indians came up with breeding cobras.
Okay, but I'm curious to hear, how does this relate to term limits?
Gano'n din yun, ma'am. Kasi the problem is the dominance of rich and famous candidates, not term limits, not the family disqualifications. Or maybe I have another example, rice. Very expensive, nobody can buy it. Your solution is price control, your solution is subsidy. You don't address the root cause, which is the maybe the high cost of production.
But Attorney, from Attorney
yes, ma'am.
At this point, yeah.
I'm curious because you said that this is also like giving up our democracy, but the United States, they do have term limits, so they're known to be one of the usually models for a democratic country. But European countries are also known for having really good democracy. So bakit sa Europe wala namang term limits but they seem to function very well? Can you share with us your empirical evidence that says that term limits are crucial for democracy?
Yes, that's correct. First of all, you must remember that the 1987 Constitution was born right after the throw of the alleged dictator, President Marcos. Although I admire President Marcos, okay? There is nothing wrong with having a dictatorial form of government, an authoritarian form of government, because it may work for a certain country or it may not work. Like, for example, in Singapore, the authoritarian leadership of Lee Kuan Yew for 30 years works well for them. In the Philippines, the 40 years rule of President Marcos Sr. Was dubbed as a dictatorship. And I'm not so sure if it was good or bad for this country because we are divided. There is 50%, I think, of Filipinos claim that dictatorship was good and 50% claim that it resulted in martial law, which is bad.
Okay.
So I'm neutral about...
But what about when it comes to term limits?
Exactly. So remember, when we removed President Marcos Sr. through the EDSA Revolution, 1987 Constitution was born. The intent of the framers was to ensure that we'll not go back to any other form of government, but to retain and to maintain democracy.
Partner, I'll address this react to what Attorney Dindo said, what you said. Because at the end of the day, in the United States, the president has term limits, but the members of Congress do not. That is why, to a certain extent, a lot of the members of Congress, in the Senate and in Congress, nagkakaroon sila ng expertise. Kasi matagal sila doon. Kunyari, kung ikaw ay isang chairman ng Foreign Relations Committee, hindi ka lang chairman ng Foreign Relations Committee for 3 years or 6 years. Ikaw ay chairman ng Foreign Relations Committee as long as you're re-elected. Kasi walang term limit sila sa Senado pati sa Kongreso. And so you gain institutional knowledge. Ang nangyayari dito sa atin, it can be argued, is because of the term limits. Sometimes, kakaupo mo lang, foreign affairs, especially foreign affairs, which is a very, very complicated, complex topic, especially now, no, where we live in a VUCA world, no, volatile, uncertain, ambiguous, no, complicated. Don't you think, sa tingin nyo, na mas maganda kung tanggalin na lang yung term limits, hindi sa presidente, no? Just like the US may term limits yan. Kasi otherwise, as you mentioned, magkakaroon ng dictatorship. Pero allow na lang, lift it up, tanggalin yung term limits, that way, ang tao, boboto. Kung gusto nila, tuloy-tuloy yung pagboboto. Kung ayaw nila, di hindi nila bobotohin. Pero coming up with the term limits, hindi ba sa tingin nyo, if I quickly lang from both of you, wasn't this a knee-jerk reaction to the martial law years?
Yeah, and I think that was Attorney Nepomuceno's point. But what I admire about her, she's not afraid to be controversial when she said that dictatorships can be good. But to be objective, the first country that entered my mind was Singapore because yun yung tinatawag nilang benevolent dictatorship.
But partner, I want to know, was it a reaction? Don't you think that the Constitution, to a certain extent, was really a reaction to the Marcos years? Kaya nga, natatakot sila, naglagay sila ng term limit.
May I address that?
Yes, please.
Initially, it was a reaction. But if you will look at how this Constitution gave life to our life as a nation, the years following 1987, it's actually, we have enjoyed the benefits of democracy and we want to retain that.
Okay.
So if we lift off term limits, I'm not sure if we can still maintain that.
Okay.
However, may I address your
Please.
hypothetical situation that, like you were mentioning, the United States, they have congressmen who sit for unlimited term.
Yes.
Actually, in the Philippines, if you perform well and you're a congressman, you can be re-elected for 3 consecutive terms, or a total of 9 years. I think that serving as a congressman for 9 years would be considered as unlimited.
Okay, so 9 years is like almost a decade, long enough time to be serving.
It's effectively unlimited period of time.
Okay, and at this point, let's move on to our next subtopic, which I think would be related to what you're saying, is 9 years, technically a term limit.
Unlimited for, especially if you're senior.
So now let's move to our next subtopic, which would be related to constitutional principles and the right to political participation. Is the removal of term limits consistent with Constitution's democratic ideals, or does it erode them?
Well, Attorney Donato, you have 2 minutes for your perspective.
Yes. I come from the position that public office is a public trust. Public office is a privilege, it's not a right. Therefore, it's up to the sovereign people if they will put limits or not. So, now whether or not that's good or bad, that's wisdom. So, that's the debate right now. Some say that there's a side which says that's a good, it gives it supports democracy. For us, it's not good. It does not promote political democracy. So that's the constitution part. Now, there's an issue there in the top subtopic about evolving rules on term limits. From what we understand and read, there's none. It's fixed. In the Constitution, it's fixed. 6 years for president, vice president, 6 + 6 for senator, 3 for local officials. if we would like to change it, then we will have to go back to the Constitution and change it. So I think it's good that we discuss these things so that everybody will think about it. And if there's a better way, if there's a better design on how we should be governed, then let's go for it. So removing term limits, that's good. But we just have to, I just need to add something. It must come with adopting the removal mechanisms, and it must come with a shift from voting at large to voting by small districts. If we have those three, we'll be in a better shape.
Okay.
Thank
So I like Attorney Dindo, ha. Slowly, nag-move na rin yung position niya. He's a bit conceding na pwedeng tanggalin yung term limits. Yes. And Attorney Nepomuceno, your 2 minutes with respect to the subtopic on political participation and constitutional principles.
Yes, actually, that is a good question, and it has been addressed by empirical evidence in the report on democracy limitation of mandates of the Venice Commission. Now, this report is based on data and gathered from 18 European countries, and these 18 European countries have their respective constitutions, and these 18 European countries have term limits. So the conclusion arrived at in the report is that modern democracy can only function with or through the limitations that it has set for itself. Of course, the limitation of mandate, meaning the term limit, and the right to re-election of the holders of political functions are key principles that limit democracy, but at the same time make it possible. In other words, empirical evidence, if you look around countries all over the world, for example, the Chinese Communist Party, it's been ruling for unlimited number of years now. It's in the form of a communism form of government. Lee Kuan Yew ruled for 30 years. The form of government is authoritarianism. However, the normal characteristic of a democratic country is that their presidents are ruling for very limited time. So there is a link between the term limit, short limited rule of a president, to the form of government of democracy. So meaning to say that if you will apply these observations to the Philippines, if we remove the term limits and one president can rule throughout his lifetime, democracy may be lost. It will become eventually authoritarianism or communism or any form of government.
Thank you, Attorney Nepomuceno. We now go to the other 6-minute open exchange as we've done much earlier. So we remain again on the subtopic, which is constitutional principles and the right to political participations. Let's begin that exchange. Who would like to talk first? Perhaps
Perhaps you have a question,
You have a question?
with respect to any statement made.
Yeah, I'll just make a comment on the rule of Marcos Sr. Yeah. When we were young, we were taught to hate him. So kasama tayo doon. Kasama ako doon. But when we became professionals, you take a second look. He had many good projects. But there's one thing that he missed, I think. His 1976 amendment made him like president for life. So he nakasulat doon, incumbent will continue to blah 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 rule blah blah blah, and there's no end to it. So I think that's the mistake there. You can have you can remove the term limits for as long as you need to renew your mandate every 5 years or whatever that is. So that's what we think. Anyway, the voters will judge. If you don't do good anymore, they will vote you out. So and then of course that should come with dispersing political power from one person. President kasi is the presidential form is closest to a dictatorship. Why? You have one person, 6 years in Malacanang, immune from suit. He appoints the prosecutors. He appoints the judges. He controls the army, and his term is twice of the congressman. So you don't have to wonder why whenever we have a new president, everybody will change parties. That's how we designed it. So if we don't like it, we change it. So yun, dito sa bago, parliamentary or whatever hybrid that is, we can remove the term limits. It's not necessary anymore if the power is dispersed.
So in other words, what you're saying is that if we go parliamentary, then you don't need the term limits, but presidential form, although I don't totally agree with you that it's dictatorial because it's three branches of government coexisting with themselves, co-equal. But then again, that's a point that you raised. What do you think of that, Atty. Nepomuceno?
In part, I agree that term limits may be removed. However, this must be qualified because if you will look at the current practice in the political environment of this country, for example, if you're a congressman and you're re-elected for 3 consecutive terms, you're a mayor, you're elected for 3 consecutive terms. That's quite a lot. It feels like a lifetime for a mayor or a lifetime for a congressman to be serving the country for 9 straight years.
But attorney,
so that's effectively removing the term limit. It feels like you don't have a term limit if you serve for 9 straight years.
But attorney, I think the term limits also have led to political dynasties, as pointed out by Attorney Dindo, wherein you have the incumbent after his term limit passes on that position to his wife or the kids, and then eventually 9 years becomes 27 years. Actually, I was talking to one of the floor directors here just the other day, and she said that in her city, sa probinsya niya, hawak na yun nung same political family since the 70s daw. So I suppose to a certain extent, without term limits, you can perpetuate within the same family.
Actually, the existence of political dynasties is a circumvention of the term limit. So if your proposition is to remove the term limit, you already have it. Effectively, if you look at the political dynasties, they don't have term limits effectively. But
So-
at least in writing and in the Constitution, at least we should put that.
Okay. I'm very curious, with the empirical evidence, you have this paper from the Venice Commission. Did they show any correlation between economic prosperity, democracies having better outcomes for those countries that have term limits?
So this is a question on economics. Actually, there's a link between democracy and economics. Democratic countries are failing economically.
Failing.
Yes.
Okay, so
That's
by the way,
That's another topic
that is
altogether.
not covered in
remove
the
term
questions.
limits.
Yes,
That's
yes,
a new,
yeah.
That's a new
It's a
topic
new-
So
altogether.
it's like almost
So we'll,
almost trying to get just democracy for the sake of democracy,
so
no?
that's the new topic altogether, partner, that we can siguro have in one of our next
Yes,
forums.
yeah,
Because
very
what you're
interesting.
saying is that is democracy a boon or a bane to economic development, especially if we position ourselves with what has happened in countries around us, in ASEAN, for example, or is it really because the United States is obviously a very successful
And now
country?
you brought
It's
that up
democratic.
because Singapore is, what do they call that? The authoritarian
first world,
government, no term limit, but Lee Kuan Yew was able to make the country very prosperous.
They call that benevolent dictatorship. That's what they used to term it
If I
before.
may make some comment, instead of looking at Europe or the North, let's look at Asia because we're Asians.
ASEAN,
The culture is probably the same, and around us, the prosperous countries had. Let's not call it dictatorship. Let's say continuous leadership, 15 to 20 years. That's how they transformed from third world to first. Singapore, South Korea, Taiwan, China. Now, yung mga second runner-up, Malaysia, Thailand, etc. Tayo na dun pa rin sa, So we're still at the back end. So I think I go back to what our German client said. There's a benefit in continuity. As long as you have a mechanism to weed out those who are not performing.
You know, partner, before we go on that break, I just wanted to share that, talk about presidential term limits, for example. There was a discussion. They're saying that 4 years is too short for a good president, but 8 years is too long naman daw for a bad president.
That's
So they
true.
decided to come up with 6. Now, as to whether that 6 really makes sense or not, I don't know. But one thing I can maybe share is that the fact na nakikita naman natin, kung talagang magaling yung presidente at marami siya nagagawa, sana mas matagal.
Yeah.
Di ba? Pero kung hindi naman magaling, sana mas maikli. So, that's where we are now. And that was the wisdom of the framers of the Constitution, as far as the presidential term limit is concerned, that they made it up to 6.
Very interesting discussion. So we'll have to discuss that further on how to regulate yung extremes of having a very good leader and then a bad leader. But we'll take a quick break for now. When we come back, it's time for final thoughts and the questions that really matter. You're watching Abogado.
Welcome back to Abogado. And if you're just joining us, we've been tackling a timely and quite controversial proposition, and the debate has been quite heated, but very engaging. Should term limits for elected officials be removed?
And so engaging that even during the commercial break, we were still
Exactly.
discussing as a group. Arguing in favor of removing term limits is Attorney Dindo Donato of Tanggulang Demokrasya, while opposing the proposition is Attorney Socorro Maricel Nepomuceno.
Well, so far we've explored how term limits impact political accountability, governance, and leadership development.
And we've just wrapped a compelling discussion on the constitutional principles and democratic values at stake. Now it's time for our guests' final reflections. First, Attorney Dindo Donato, your closing reflections. You have 2 minutes.
From our end, what we would like to see is a compromise between in allowing those who are performing well to continue, and at the same time, allowing the voters to remove those who are not performing. So how do we do that? One, we remove the term limits. Two, we put in all the mechanisms to remove the incumbent. Three, we shift from voting at large to voting by small districts. If you have small districts, it's also easy to recall. Yeah. So maybe I'll go into the mechanisms to remove. We went through these different forms: parliamentary form, presidential form, mayor type LGU, council type LGU. We took in all the ways how do we remove somebody who's sitting there, and we put them all in one box. That we had our own draft. That's the people's draft. I think that's the way to go. Lift it so that those who perform well can continue, but at the same time, they will always have to look out over their shoulder because they can be removed anytime. Vote of no confidence, dissolution of the assembly, recall, and there's 2 ways of recall. Recall by the voters and recall by the barangay councilors, municipal councilors. There's an amendment to the LGC, local government code. They removed the second one. So we were thinking, we put that back. 2 ways of recall. For example, the city mayor can be recalled by all the barangay captains, barangay kagawad, and the provincial governor can be recalled by all the municipal and city councilors. That's in the original local government code, but they removed it. So those are the things that we would like to do. Strengthen the accountability provisions, then we don't need those permits.
Thank you so much, Attorney Dindo. Maraming salamat. And now, Attorney Nepomuceno, ang iyong mga closing reflections dito sa ating pinag-uusapan.
All right. I'll since this is a closing speech,
Yeah.
then may I speak in Tagalog? I would like to address my countrymen. Okay? Bilang isang Pilipino at naunawaan ko ang 1987 Constitution, ang mga term limits na nakasaad sa ating Constitution ay para sa akin tama lamang, at ako ay bilang isang Pilipino, ako ay kontento at wala akong reklamo sapagkat ang isang mayor halimbawa o ang isang congressman halimbawa, kapag maganda ang kanyang performance, maaari siyang ma-re-elect for 3 consecutive terms or a total of 9 years. So, sa loob ng 9 years na yon, ito ay napakahabang panahon na para sa isang individual. Sapagkat ang trabaho nila ay mabigat. Kung gagawin nyo pang 12 years, 15 years, masyado nang mapapagod yung tao. Dahil tao lamang sila. At ito ay mayor at congressman at senador lamang. Hindi kailangan masyadong matagal. So ang 9 years or 6 years para sa senator, tama na yon. Ang issue dito sa ibang mga katulad kong kapwa Pilipino, yung 6 years ng isang presidente, ito ba ay dapat na hanggang sa siya ay mamatay o hanggang 6 years lamang? Sa akin, sa nakita ko sa base sa history, maganda naman ang performance ng ating mga presidente at wala pa namang nangyayari na isang presidente ay pinanghinayangan natin sapagkat 6 na taon lamang siyang namuno. Wala namang tayong ganong record sa ating history. So siguro kailangan munang may mangyari na ganoong presidente na napakabait, napakagaling at nakulangan tayo sa 6 years. Pero wala namang nangyayari pa sa ating history. So sa akin, tama lang po muna ang 6 years para sa isang presidente.
Okay. At this point, Attorney Mike and I will each pose a question to our guests to help bring out any remaining insights. Let's keep the answers clear, concise, and to the point because we only have a few minutes left on the show, unfortunately. But Attorney Mike, do you have any questions?
Yeah, thank you so much, partner. Talagang very interesting itong discussion natin. No? So, itong tanong na ito for the both of you. Sa aking pananaw lang kasi, itong paglalagay ng term limits, especially dun sa term limits ng ating mga membro ng Kongreso at mga local government units, kasi nga, ito parang siguro reaksyon na baka iabuso pag walang term limit. Pero, this is my question to both of you. Isn't it to a certain extent, are we saying that tayo mga Pilipino, hindi pa tayo mature enough to be able to actually choose who our leaders should be? In other words, dapat ipaubayan na natin sa taong bayan, exercising their democratic rights under the Constitution to choose their leaders. Kung gusto nilang itong taong ito ay mag-serve for 20, 25 years, why not? Pero the fact na linagyan natin ng term limit, hindi ba sa tingin nyo ito ay parang sinasabi natin, hindi sandali lang. Wala tayong tiwala sa ating mga kababayan. Hindi yata nila alam kung sinong dapat botohin nila or baka nabibili sila or nasusway sila by power, star power or financial power. Ano sa tingin nyo?
So, tayo ba ay mature na pumili? Actually, wala naman po ako nakikitang problema sa botanteng Pilipino. Ang kailangan po lamang ay yung taong ibinoto at maraming sasang-ayon sa akin na kapag ibinoto kayo ng Pilipino, 3 years man yan o 6 years o 9 years, gawin nyo yung tama. Gawin nyo yung mandato ng tao sa inyo.
Okay. I have another question because, go ahead, Attorney Dindo.
Yeah,
Yes.
I think we should go for a removal and just strengthen the accountability provisions.
Removal of term limits.
I actually agree with Attorney.
Remove the term limits, but we strengthen the ways on how to expel, remove those who are sitting there. Yeah.
Well, I agree with Attorney Dindo to the extent that we should strengthen the accountability provisions because what I'm seeing right now is even the power of the ombudsman to implement a preventive suspension order does cut the term or at least interrupt a term of an incumbent if they have any violations of law. But Attorney Dindo, I'd just like to clarify, what do you mean by allowing smaller districts to vote as being more effective for recall? Because kung sabihin nga natin will strengthen the ability to replace erring officials or those that have very poor performance, how do we do that if you have a nationally elected official like a senator? Parang baka ang hirap i-muster yung enough votes to recall.
Basically, ma'am, the system we're looking at, it's unicameral, and the small district idea is not only for the national government but also for the local government. So just to, for example, konsihal, councilor, one city, one mayor, one congressman, 8 councilors. Those 8 councilors are voted in the same constituency as the mayor, as the congressman. Sino mananalo doon? O di si rich and famous na naman. yung barangay mayaman, baka lahat ng manalong konsehal doon galing lang sa barangay mayaman. Eh paano yung barangay mahirap, wala silang representante doon? So what we're saying is we cut it into single member districts. That's it. That's the council type LGU. We start there. So yung konsehal, so it's basically one small district is like a cluster of few barangays lang. Whether kahit na barangay mahirap yan, they can elect their own representative in the council. And that council, kasi nga council type LGU, acts like a parliament. They will choose among themselves who is the mayor. So ita-transform mo yan sa national level, that's the parliament. That's our advocacy. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So, pwedeng magtanggal ng term limits kung meron tayong mechanisms to
Yung ganyan, ma'am.
really
We
hold
probably don't need
officials
those things
accountable.
anymore. Yeah.
But at the moment, Attorney Maricel, do you agree that wala na talaga namang effectively term limits? Like basically, our term limits is a hypocrisy. Because a lot of the positions, I think we can do a study on this, or meron na yata existing study na marami ng areas in the Philippines where they are either unopposed and it's just really the families rotating in terms of positions.
Actually, I don't see any problem with political dynasties for as long as that particular political dynasty is performing well. Because if a political dynasty is performing well, it's like having a good leader for an unlimited period of time, as he wishes. So that's fine. There's a problem only if the political dynasty is abusing their power, their resources.
That's why you're reluctant to remove term limits.
And here is where term limits come to safeguard democratic processes.
Attorney Mike, what do you think resonated with you most?
Very good. I'm glad that you asked me, partner. Well, actually, both arguments resonated quite well. No? But if I may, sa aking pong pananaw, ay siguro talagang kailangan bisitahin natin the idea of having term limits. Ako ay medyo bias ako na siguro eventually tanggalin natin yung term limits. No? Ngunit, bago natin po ito tanggalin, kailangan po magkaroon ng reforma. Anong klaseng reforma, for example? A stronger political party system. The problem with our country right now is binoboto natin ng tao hindi sa kanyang plataforma, hindi sa kanyang mga paniniwala. We vote him because he's popular or because he's rich. And the sad part, because of that, when a person is popular, the party, instead of creating the person and becomes popular, the party will gravitate to the person who's popular, and they don't even believe in the same thing. So aking pananaw po ay siguro, dapat na siguro bisitahin natin itong partner, bisitahin natin itong term limits, at ako'y naniniwala na siguro dapat tanggalin. Ngunit bago natin tanggalin, lakasan natin ang party system natin. Number 2, they should pass a law on turncoatism. Yung pagpapalit-palit ng partido.
Gusto ko yan.
Diba?
Gusto ko yan na dapat naman may accountability
sa ibang
paglipat
bansa.
ng lipat.
If you're in the UK, if you're a Tory, and if you're Labour, di ganon, di ba? If you're a Democrat, if you're Republican, of course, sometimes there are changes, but hardly. Bakit? Lalo na in a parliamentary system. Kasi ang kanilang paniniwala, yun ang kanilang foundation ng pagtakbo. Hindi yung porke sikat sila at tatakbo na lang sila. Kaya that's how I look at it, partner. I think we should really review, but we should strengthen first. There should be certain reforms, and we should also strengthen yung pinag-usapan natin last time, yung party list system. Dapat palakasin yun. Hindi lang dapat to represent marginalized sectors of society, but pati na rin po yung iba pang interest. Gayahin yung European model na pinakita mo kanina.
And finally, for me, one of my main concerns with not having term limits is the fact that there's an advantage normally to the incumbent.
Correct.
So it is hard for democracy to be at play if you have an incumbent that's also using his position and ingratiating people, and we have this political patronage. So sila na lang paulit-ulit because they have that advantage of being in power and using resources. But I think there's hope to change that. Like Attorney Dindo, you said that if we increase our provisions on accountability, that can be addressed. Right now, I admire the COMELEC. They have been also interrupting or at least holding accountable yung mga candidates that have been using ayuda, for example, as a form of vote buying or pagka ginagamit mo yung resources nga ng position mo to use it for the campaign. So,
Galing.
yun nga,
Galing mo,
palakasin yung mga
Chairman.
ganyan.
Oo, di ba? Galing ni Chairman
So,
Garcia.
thank you to our
Yeah,
COMELEC.
yeah.
So, yan yung mga example no, na
Tama.
pwede natin
Tama, partner.
para hindi naman disadvantageous ang having terms. And our sincere thanks to Attorney Dindo Donato and Attorney Socorro Maricel Nepomuceno for sharing their time, expertise, and valuable insights with us tonight.
As you know, in any functioning democracy, the clash of ideas is essential to uncovering truth and refining policy. Whether term limits serve as a safeguard against abuse or a constraint on the electorate's freedom to choose, what matters is that citizens are informed, engaged, and equipped to participate in legal and political discourse.
And that is the very purpose of our program, Abogado.
Friends, join us again next week as we dissect another issue at the crossroads of law and society.
This is Abogado. Good night.
Good night.